Every man thinks he knows what women fear. He thinks it is being left, being cheated on, being replaced, being ignored. But those fears are only the surface. There is something much deeper. Something almost never said out loud. It is hidden behind smiles that look real. Behind small arguments that seem to be about nothing. Behind questions that sound simple. Do you still love me? Are you okay? What are you thinking? Most men hear these questions. Very few hear what is really being asked. Because sometimes a woman is not looking for an answer. She is trying to find out if something has already changed. And strangely enough, the words she fears the most are not insults. Not shouting. Not anger. Sometimes they are spoken calmly. Softly. Almost without emotion. A single sentence can shake everything she believed about the relationship. Not because it is loud. But because it changes how she sees herself. Carl Jung believed that people often wear a mask to survive in the world. He called it the persona. It is the version of ourselves we want others to see. Strong. Confident. Happy. In love. But behind that mask lives another part. The part that is afraid. The part that wonders, what if I am not enough? Almost everyone carries this hidden question. Men do. Women do. It does not matter how beautiful someone is. Or how successful. Or how confident they appear. Deep inside, many people quietly hope that the person they love will keep choosing them. Again. And again. And again. That hope becomes even stronger in love. Because love is one of the few places where people allow themselves to be completely seen. At least they try. Think about the beginning of a relationship. Everything feels alive. Every message matters. Every smile feels special. Hours pass like minutes. You cannot wait to see each other again. The smallest touch feels important. You feel chosen. And being chosen changes something inside you. You begin to believe that maybe, just maybe, someone sees your real self, and still wants to stay. That feeling is powerful. Maybe more powerful than most people realize. Because it slowly becomes part of your identity. You stop asking, who am I? Instead, without noticing, you begin asking, who am I to this person? There is nothing wrong with that. Love naturally changes us. It teaches us to care, to trust, to build something together. But there is also a quiet danger. Little by little, your happiness starts depending on another person's eyes. You begin seeing yourself through them. If they smile at you, you feel valuable. If they become distant, you suddenly question everything. Nothing about your face has changed. Nothing about your heart has changed. Yet somehow, you no longer feel like the same person. This is why relationships can become so confusing. Because what hurts is not always what happened. Sometimes what hurts is the story we tell ourselves about what happened. A late reply becomes, they are losing interest. A quiet evening becomes, I did something wrong. A tired voice becomes, they don't love me anymore. The mind hates empty spaces. When it does not know the truth, it creates one. Sometimes the story is true. Many times it is not. But emotions react before facts arrive. Psychologists have found that people often notice possible rejection faster than acceptance. It is part of how our minds try to protect us from losing important relationships. That does not mean every fear is correct. It means the brain would rather prepare for pain than be surprised by it. Now imagine what happens when someone you deeply love suddenly says something that confirms your biggest hidden fear. Not with anger. Not during a fight. Just calmly. As if it were obvious. Those words can stay alive for years. Long after the conversation is over. Long after the relationship ends. Because some sentences become part of the voice inside our own head. Arthur Schopenhauer believed that much of human suffering comes from desire. We always want something that feels just out of reach. More love. More certainty. More security. More proof. And when we finally get those things, we become afraid of losing them. It is a strange circle. The greater the love, the greater the possibility of fear. This does not mean love is a mistake. It means love asks us to risk something. Every person who falls in love quietly accepts one truth. I am giving someone the power to hurt me, not because they want to, but because they matter. That is why the deepest wounds rarely come from strangers. A stranger cannot destroy the image you built of yourself. But someone you love can. Not always on purpose. Sometimes without even knowing. There is a story about an old tree that stood alone in a wide field. Storm after storm came. The tree never fell. Yet somehow, you no longer feel like the same person. This is why relationships can become so confusing. Because what hurts is not always what happened. Sometimes what hurts is the story we tell ourselves about what happened. A late reply becomes, they are losing interest. A quiet evening becomes, I did something wrong. A tired voice becomes, they don't love me anymore. The mind hates empty spaces. When it does not know the truth, it creates one. Sometimes the story is true. Many times it is not. But emotions react before facts arrive. Psychologists have found that people often notice possible rejection faster than acceptance. It is part of how our minds try to protect us from losing important relationships. That does not mean every fear is correct. It means the brain would rather prepare for pain than be surprised by it. Now imagine what happens when someone you deeply love suddenly says something that confirms your biggest hidden fear. Not with anger. Not during a fight. Just calmly. As if it were obvious. Those words can stay alive for years. Long after the conversation is over. Long after the relationship ends, because some sentences become part of the voice inside our own head. Arthur Schopenhauer believed that much of human suffering comes from desire. We always want something that feels just out of reach. More love. More certainty. More security. More proof. And when we finally get those things, we become afraid of losing them. It is a strange circle. The greater the love, the greater the possibility of fear. This does not mean love is a mistake. It means love asks us to risk something. Every person who falls in love quietly accepts one truth. I am giving someone the power to hurt me, not because they want to, but because they matter. That is why the deepest wounds rarely come from strangers. A stranger cannot destroy the image you built of yourself. But someone you love can. Not always on purpose. Sometimes without even knowing. There is a story about an old tree that stood alone in a wide field. Storm after storm came. The tree never fell. The strange thing is that the sentence itself is not always cruel. In another situation, it might even sound normal. That is why it is so powerful. The meaning does not come from the words alone. It comes from who says them. Imagine a woman sitting across from the man she loves. Maybe they are having dinner. Maybe they are driving home in silence. Maybe nothing seems wrong. Then he looks at her and says, "You've changed." At first, those words sound harmless. People change all the time. Life changes us. Time changes us. Pain changes us. Love changes us. So why can this sentence feel so heavy? Because very often, it is not heard as an observation. It is heard as a judgment. Not, "You've grown." But, "You are no longer the woman I wanted." The words never actually say that. But fear quickly fills in the missing pieces. The mind starts asking impossible questions. When did this happen? What did I do? Can I become the person I used to be? Many people begin searching through old memories. Old pictures. Old messages. Old versions of themselves. As if somewhere in the past they might find the answer. But here is the problem. No one can go backward. The woman from 5 years ago no longer exists. Just as the man from 5 years ago no longer exists. Life keeps moving. Yet many relationships secretly expect people to stay exactly the same. That expectation creates quiet pressure. Some people stop growing because they are afraid growth might cost them love. They stop speaking honestly. They hide new dreams. They laugh at jokes they no longer find funny. They agree when they really want to disagree. Slowly, they begin acting like someone they no longer recognize. Not because they are fake. Because they are afraid. Afraid that if they become fully themselves, someone will stop loving them. Jung believed that becoming your true self is one of the hardest journeys in life. He believed real growth often requires letting go of the mask we wear for others. But that journey is uncomfortable. Because every time we show our real thoughts, we take a risk. The risk of rejection. The risk of disappointment. The risk of hearing words we never wanted to hear. There is another sentence that cuts even deeper. Sometimes it comes after months of silence. Sometimes after years together. I need space. Again, the words themselves are not evil. Every healthy person needs space sometimes. Time to think. Time to rest. Time alone. Psychologists often say that healthy relationships allow room for both closeness and independence. Wanting space is not automatically a sign that love is gone. But fear rarely listens to calm explanations. Fear immediately asks, space from what? Space from work? Space from stress? Or, space from me? That last question is the one that echoes in the heart. Because when emotions become strong, people often confuse distance with abandonment. A few quiet days begin to feel like forever. Every unread message feels louder. Every hour feels longer. The imagination becomes busy. It writes stories without asking permission. He met someone else. She's not enough anymore. He is happier without me. Sometimes none of those stories are true. Yet the body reacts as if they are. The heart races. Sleep becomes difficult. Food loses its taste. It is amazing how the human mind can suffer over events that have not even happened. This is one reason why anxiety feels so real. The body responds to imagined danger almost as strongly as real danger. Not because the mind is weak. Because the mind is trying to protect what feels valuable. There is an old story about two travelers crossing a desert. One carried a heavy bag filled with stones. The other carried only water. The first traveler believed the stones might become useful someday. So he refused to leave them behind. Hour after hour, his shoulders hurt more. His legs became weaker. By sunset, he was almost unable to walk. The stones had never actually helped him. They only made the journey harder. Many emotional fears work the same way. We carry old words. Old disappointments. Old betrayals. Old heartbreak. Then we enter a new relationship still holding all that weight. Without meaning to, we ask the new person to prove they are different from everyone before them. Sometimes they try. Sometimes they truly love us. But they cannot erase memories they never created. This is why healing matters. Not because it guarantees a perfect relationship. But because it keeps yesterday from controlling tomorrow. Then there is another sentence. Simple. Short. Cold. I'm not happy. Few words create more confusion. Because happiness is difficult to measure. It changes from week to week. From season to season. From one stage of life to another. No person can stay happy every day. That is simply not how human emotions work. But when someone says, "I'm not happy." Many partners hear something completely different. "You are the reason." That is where guilt begins. A woman may start replaying every conversation, every mistake, every forgotten birthday, every argument, every moment she chose work instead of dinner, every time she was tired, every time she cried. She begins building a case against herself, even if no one asked her to. Schopenhauer believed people often search for permanent happiness, even though life naturally moves between joy and struggle. From his point of view, expecting endless happiness creates disappointment. Whether someone agrees with him or not, his idea raises an important question. Should one person really carry the full responsibility for another person's happiness? Most people would probably say no. Yet many relationships quietly live as if the answer is yes. When one person feels empty, the other immediately feels guilty. When one person struggles, the other feels like a failure. Love slowly becomes a job no one can fully succeed at. And that is exhausting. The strongest relationships are usually not built on the promise of constant happiness. They are built on honesty, on patience, on the courage to say, "I am struggling," without turning that struggle into blame. Still, there is one sentence that many women fear more than almost anything else. Not because it ends a relationship, but because it erases something much deeper. It questions whether everything they believed was ever real. Those words are quiet, almost emotionless. "I don't feel the same anymore." No shouting. No anger. No dramatic scene. Just a calm sentence. Sometimes spoken while looking out a window. Sometimes while avoiding eye contact. Sometimes with tears, sometimes without any. These words do not only speak about the present. They quietly rewrite the past. Suddenly every beautiful memory becomes uncertain. Every promise feels fragile. Every "I love you" is questioned. The mind begins asking, when did it change? Was I the last to know? Were those happy moments real? That is why these words hurt so deeply. They do not simply describe change. They challenge trust in memory itself. And once memory begins to feel uncertain, people often stop trusting their own heart. That is one of the hardest places anyone can find themselves. When trust in your own heart begins to disappear, something inside you changes. You stop listening to your feelings. You stop believing your instincts. You begin asking other people what you should think. What do you think he meant? Was I too much? Did I ruin everything? It is strange. The person who once felt sure of herself can suddenly feel like a stranger inside her own mind. And this is where the deepest lesson begins. Because the words that hurt us the most often reveal something we have been trying to avoid. Not the truth about the other person. The truth about ourselves. Many people spend years believing that love is something another person gives them. If they love me, I matter. If they stay, I am enough. If they leave, I lose my value. It sounds logical. But it quietly hands your entire identity to someone else. Imagine giving another person the keys to your home. Now imagine giving them the keys to your happiness. Your confidence. Your peace. Your self-worth. That is a much bigger gift. And also a much bigger risk. Because people change. Sometimes they change together. Sometimes they grow apart. Sometimes life pulls them in different directions. That does not always mean someone failed. It means life is complicated. Nietzsche believed that life constantly asks us to become stronger through change. Not because pain is good, but because avoiding every painful experience often keeps us from becoming who we could be. Whether someone agrees with his philosophy or not, there is something powerful in that idea. Pain can destroy a person. But it can also reveal a strength they never knew they had. Think about a broken bone. At first, it feels impossible to use again. Everything hurts. Even small movements. But as it heals, the bone becomes strong once more. Emotional pain is different. It leaves no cast. No bandage. No visible scar. People may smile while carrying wounds no one can see. That is why kindness matters more than we often realize. A single sentence can stay in someone's mind for years. But so can a single act of understanding. Sometimes the words people remember forever are surprisingly simple. I'm here. I understand. You don't have to face this alone. Those sentences do not magically erase pain. But they remind someone they are not carrying it by themselves. Psychologists often speak about emotional safety, not as a place where conflict never happens, but as a place where people feel accepted even when they are vulnerable. Where they can admit fear without being laughed at. Where they can cry without feeling weak. Where they can disagree without believing love will disappear. That kind of safety is rare. And because it is rare, it becomes priceless. Ironically, many women do not actually fear hearing difficult words. They fear hearing difficult words from someone who once made them feel completely safe. The same sentence spoken by a stranger means almost nothing. The same sentence spoken by the person you love can change your entire world. That is the power of emotional connection. But there is another side to this story. Men have hidden fears too. Many fear hearing, "I don't need you. I never respected you. I chose the wrong person." Behind different words often hides the same fear. The fear of no longer being enough. That is why this conversation is not really about women. Or men. It is about being human. Every heart wants to feel seen. Every heart wants to feel accepted. Every heart quietly hopes, "Please don't make me regret trusting you." Maybe that is why real love is much less about perfect words, and much more about careful words. Words spoken during anger can leave scars long after the anger disappears. Words spoken with kindness can become memories that last a lifetime. Before speaking, we often ask, "Is this true?" Maybe we should also ask, "Is this necessary? And can I say it in a way that protects the person instead of breaking them?" Honesty matters. But honesty without compassion can become cruelty. Compassion without honesty can become deception. Real love asks for both. There is one final thought that many people discover too late. The sentence we fear hearing from someone else often already exists inside our own head. "I'm not enough. I'm too difficult. I'm impossible to love." When another person says something that sounds similar, it hurts so much because it awakens a voice that was already there. That is why healing cannot depend only on finding the right partner. It also depends on changing the conversation we have with ourselves. Because if your own inner voice becomes kinder, the world becomes a little less frightening. You stop chasing constant reassurance. You stop begging people to prove your worth. You stop believing every moment of distance means rejection. Instead, you begin standing on something much stronger than another person's opinion. You begin standing on self-respect. And something surprising happens. The healthier your relationship with yourself becomes, the healthier your relationships with others often become too. You love more freely. You fear less. You communicate more honestly. You stop trying to earn love every single day. Because you no longer believe your value disappears when someone changes their mind. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson hidden behind all the words we fear. No sentence can truly define your worth. Not praise. Not rejection. Not goodbye. Not silence. People can describe their feelings, they cannot decide your value. That choice has always belonged to you. Maybe the real question was never, what words does every woman fear hearing from a man? Maybe the better question is, why do certain words have so much power over us in the first place? The answer to that question can change far more than a relationship. It can change the way you see yourself. And once that changes, no conversation will ever sound quite the same again. What do you think? Is there one sentence that can change a relationship forever, or is it the meaning we attach to those words that truly shapes our lives? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if you enjoy exploring psychology, philosophy, and the hidden patterns of human behavior, don't forget to subscribe. There are many more conversations waiting for us.